Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Team Tuesday this week with Ryan Brook. Hi, Ryan. Welcome back.
Hi, Vasco. It's good to be here again.
Absolutely. So, Ryan, on Team Tuesday, of course, we talk about teams, but before we dive into that, we do want to know what was perhaps the book that most inspired you as a Scrum Master?
So I guess the book I would go to is a book called The Hitchhiker's Guide to Agile Coaching by Agile42. And it wasn't so much the content, even though the content was fantastic, it was the way in which I got the book. So I was given it as a gift by a coach, a mentor at the time. I was a very junior Scrum Master. And he knew I wanted to improve. And he made this investment with his own money and said, hey, read this. It's great. And yes, the content was fantastic. It made me think about active listening and the way in which we do that. Everyone thinks they're a great listener, but actually taking the steps of taking time to comprehend, retain, and respond. Going through those phases when we listen was really powerful. It was a really good takeaway from that book. And I would recommend anyone to take a read of it because there's just some really great questions that are powerful that you can take immediately into your practice. So yeah, it's an awesome, inspiring book.
Absolutely. You know, it just so happens that this book had never been referred to in the podcast, but just last week, somebody referred to this book. So It's quite amazing. Maybe the book is now starting to seep into the community. That's awesome. Do you remember a particular lesson, a particular insight from the book that you would like people to know about and perhaps get them curious to read the whole book?
So yeah, I guess one part of the book that really rang true for me was, I just mentioned comprehend, retain, and respond as active listening. But when we talk about the Cynefin framework, okay, the domains of product development, we have, complicated, complex, and chaotic. And in Scrum, we talk very much about a complex domain. And we talk about probe, sense, and respond in Cynefin for complex domains. And those kind of two things, active listening and a complex domain, just seem to really marry up for me. So it made me start thinking that coaching is very complex in its nature, and no one approach works for one person. It's very human. And I like that takeaway for coaching.
And no single approach works. That's a very important aspect. Of course, as you said, it is about, active listening and the understanding that we are dealing with a complex environment or a complex system, which is a social system. But I think that one single phrase, like no single coaching approach works, is a very important tool for us to have in our toolbox as Scrum Masters. Because very often we're tempted, and that's natural, to apply what has worked in the past. But if we don't keep listening, we won't know when it's not working anymore.
That's right. You've always got to try and probe and get that response back and try and find out whether you're on the right track, right? We're empirical with our coaching as well, because like I said, it's very human. And I think sometimes some coaches I've seen in the past don't get that. They do it much more as teaching. I'm going to teach you the right way, rather than work with you, right? A coach is only as good as the coachee wants to be.
Yeah, that's also a very important insight, is the coach guides the coachee in the journey they already want to take, not the one that the coach wants them to take.
We're the passenger, not the driver. Yeah,
exactly. That's a very good point. We are the passenger, not the driver. All right, so now we turn our attention to all of those drivers out there that are the teams, right? And they are in their own journey, but sometimes their journey is not necessarily a good one, and it doesn't end up in a good place. And on Tuesdays, we like to explore those behaviors or patterns that slowly emerge in a team, but ultimately lead to problems. So, Ryan, tell us a story of a team you work with. Give us a little bit about, of the context of that team, but then walk us through the step-by-step development of that pattern or behavior that ultimately led to problems.
So I was working with a team who worked on approximately 6 or 7 products, and they were snowed under as a team. There was about 10 of them. And they had some dysfunctions in the team. They had a technical lead, a solutions architect, etc. And the situation they managed to get themselves into, because they were so snowed under, was this idea of, I don't know if you've read, Vasco, The Animals of Product Management. Have you seen that? It's a really fun kind of agile thing online. I recommend anyone to search, but it relates people in agile teams to animals. And the problem we had was we had a hippo and a zebra. We had a hippo, which is the highest paid person's opinion in the team, and we had a zebra, a person that had zero evidence but was really arrogant. So we had these two characters in the team, and what that caused the problem for was the developers. There was very little confidence to move forward. So to give you an example, in the daily scrum, they were talking at this person, they were asking for validation, and this spiral kept going on and on and on. To give you an even more specific example, one of these people took 2 weeks of leave, and the team, the developers, wouldn't release any functionality to a production environment for fear of annoying this person when they came back. So this was self-destruction. They delivered value on their own, but they just were so scared of releasing it to operations because of this person. So the problem I've seen with this team was that it was very self-destructive because they became subjected and they dug themselves a hole which was really hard for them to get out of.
Yeah, for me, it's very interesting to explore this system. Now, you introduced 3 roles here, right? The hippo, so the person whose word was God's word and you could go against. The zebra, whose word might not be so important, but they probably were so, as you said, arrogant and angry and maybe shouting even. The team was afraid to go against their word. And then you had this team, which, as far as you described, had little confidence, was afraid of irritating these other 2 characters. And it seems to me, because of that, the team really didn't own their own work. Is that how you saw it?
Absolutely. And even worse, the product owner didn't own their own product. These 2 people that I'm referring to, they were part of the developers. So we had a product owner who didn't own their own product. So there was no healthy conflict. The priorities were set by gut feeling. And it was very much, as you said, the loudest voice syndrome. You shout louder, that's the way it's going to be. And it became a problem because it was hard for the developers to be respectful. Because if in this situation, when people are shouting and being quite arrogant, to have a constructive discourse with those people is really hard without almost crossing the boundary of respect yourself. Sometimes actually saying, you know what, hands up, that's not okay, is a really powerful thing for teams and developers to be able to do, but is really challenging to do in a respectful way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually one of the challenges, is that these dynamics are, you call them self-destructing, and they are also self-reinforcing. Because the moment these characters show up in the team's context, then they create their own dynamics. Like it's impossible to avoid those dynamics. Of course, we can react to those. We can help dampen some of these behaviors and reactions to those behaviors. But the dynamics come with the characters, right? And for me, perhaps one of the key things for Scrum Masters to be aware of is to be aware of the dynamics that emerge the moment somebody comes into the room. So like if a certain person comes into the room, stand back and watch what is happening. Are people trying to avoid eye contact, for example, or do they get up and, high five or whatever, like totally different behaviors? How is the team reacting to these other characters during planning or during retrospective, as an example? So for me, the understanding these dynamics is what then gives us the ability to do our research, to ask our colleagues, to maybe ask a mentor or coach, and then come in and try to help to resolve, to dampen certain negative behaviors, to amplify certain positive behaviors. That would be, for me, the biggest takeaway. How about you, Ryan? What do you think is the biggest takeaway?
I'd agree. Interestingly, you talked about self-reinforcing behaviors, and actually the problem with self-reinforcing behaviors is because they compound over time. They start to become the norm. So in the team that I was talking about, I talked about them being called sort of subjugated, and the response to things was, well, that's just how it works. And I think the takeaway is that dealing with small issues frequently and often prevent them. It's like weeding in a garden. Taking small weeds out is easier, but if you let that grow to a point of you just can't get back, you can't fix it, you can't reset. There's not a reset button. So small and often is the takeaway with people like that, addressing them in a small way before you allow that ego to get too large.
Yeah, absolutely. Addressing those weeds that invariably start growing, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
That was a great story and a great metaphor. Thank you for that, Ryan.
You're welcome.
Tuesday is Team Day here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. But tomorrow we talk about something that goes beyond the work we do with the teams. We will talk about how to lead change and what our guests have learned from leading and participating in change programs during their career. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.